So well done for wading through the information on variables, arrays, dictionaries, and if statements. We're now in a position to do something a little bit more interesting and make another app. Now this app I'd definitely like you to attempt on your own before following along with the videos. To do that, there is one more bit of code that I need to show you, and that's how to produce a random number. As is often the case, it's very easy when you know how, and I'm going to show you here. So we'll create a variable called random number, and we'll set it equal to arc for random uniform. And then this number here, if I put in, for example, 6, this will give me a random number between 0 and 5. So we've got the number 1 there. So it's always 1 less than the number that you put there. So if you put in 10, you'll get a random number from 0 to 9. And there you can see we've got 7. So that's what you need to produce a random number. The app that I want to create is a version of the game How Many Fingers. So the computer will hold up a metaphorical number of fingers behind its back and the user has to guess. So all you need to create is a system for the user to be able to put in a number, say between 0 and 5, but you can make your computer have as many fingers as you like, and then the computer then picks a random number and tells the user whether or not they got it right. So that's the idea. Do your best to make the app completely on your own if you can, but do feel free to follow along if you have any problems. Good luck. All right, I hope that went well for you. Here we go. So we're just going to create a new project. So file, new project. And it's a single view application. I'm going to call it How Many Fingers. And save it in my apps folder. Okay, so that'll create it in the usual way, and we'll start over at main storyboard. I'm going to show you a slightly different way to create an app. If you're really only interested in one screen size, you can change the size of the storyboard itself. So let's say we're only interested in 4-inch, then we can create it so that the actual size of the storyboard that we're working with is 4-inch. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because you can't control the screen size of your user, generally speaking. But when we're just trying things out, that's absolutely fine. So let's bring in a few labels. So the layout is going to be very similar to the previous app that we made. So I'm going to bring that in there. You can see that we get some nice blue lines, which is a hint as to what's coming later on auto layout. And if I put that in there, then it'll be nicely centered. So the game was called How Many Fingers? So we'll center that, make the text a little bit larger. See, I'm not particularly focused on design here, as long as it looks playable. So let's then bring in another label. How many fingers do you think I am holding up? It's the question. Let's make that text a little bit smaller. Center it and then make it a bit smaller. There we go. Lovely. Now we'll bring in a text field for the user to enter their answer, a button, to guess, and finally, as before, a label, which we'll just leave as label for the moment, which is where we'll put their answer. Now, I'm definitely very happy for you to spend a bit of time making this a bit prettier, playing around with colors, etc. But we're really focused on the programming here, so that's a perfectly reasonable design for our purposes. Now, let's switch over to our assistant editor. And let's start dragging some things in. So the things I'm particularly interested in are the text field, which I'll call guess. The button itself, remember we need to change that to action. I'll call it guess button. And we'll need label as well. I quite like keeping my variables together at the top. Result label. Could call it something more interesting if you like. Okay. So just as before, we'll just print the results of guess.text. And then we can just run the app and make sure that everything's kind of fitting together nicely. Actually, while it's running, let's change it so that the label uses the number keyboard. Because again, we're only wanting numbers here. Okay, so if I just pop in a number there, guess, we get 43. Fantastic. Of course, it doesn't have to be a number. Whatever I put in that box at the moment will be sent to the logs. Okay. So essentially what we want to do here is get the computer to pick a random number, and we want to test whether or not the user guessed that number correctly. So let's generate the random number first in the way that I just showed you. Var random number is equal to arc4 random uniform. Now we want to go between 0 and 5 because we want to simulate the human hand. So we put a 6 there. So that'll give us a random number between 0 and 5. If you want to change that to make it harder or easier, of course, feel free. So as with the cat ears app, we need to convert the guess, which is currently a string, to an integer and check that that gives a result. And only then will we compare it against the random number, and that will stop our app crashing if the user doesn't enter anything into the box. So var, I'll call it guess int, is equal to guess.text.toInt. And then we need to check, so if guessInt is not equal to nil, oh, we don't need the brackets. You can put brackets there. If you're a JavaScript or PHP guy or girl and you like putting brackets in your if statements, Swift will accept that. It just doesn't require it. So this means that we have a result, so we can do our checking. Down here means that we don't have a result. So that's actually easier to fill in. So I'm going to do that first. So all we need to do then in this case is change result labels text to please enter a number 0 to 5. Okay, I think that's a good point to just run the app again and make sure that that's working. Obviously, if they do enter a number, everything is fine, but nothing will happen. It's only if they don't that we'll get this error. Okay, excellent. So that looked like it worked fine. We do need to make the box for the label a little bit bigger. So I'll stretch it out to the edges of the screen. You can see we get those nice blue guides as well there. And we'll center it and maybe make it slightly smaller as well. Okay, great, so that bit's working. So here, all we need to do is check whether our random number is equal to our guess int. Now there is a slight complication there. Let's see what happens when we try and do it. So the obvious way would be to say if random number is equal to guess int, then do something. But it doesn't like that because random number is actually, it's not an int. It's what's known as a uint32. Essentially, it's a bigger number, so it can take bigger values than the integer type can. But that's okay. All we need to do is convert this to an integer, and we do that using the int function. There. So now we've converted random number from a uint32 to an int, and now we can compare the two. So this means they got it right. So I'm just going to borrow that, and we'll just say something like correct if they got it right. If they didn't, then we can say something like nope, it was a, and then we can put that in. So just get our random number in there. So hopefully that makes sense. If I just run through what this code is doing, we're creating a random number between 0 and 5, one less than that number there. We're then converting our user's guess, which is guess.text, to an integer. And we're checking to see whether or not it has an integer. And if it doesn't, we go back and request that they enter a number between 0 and 5. If it does, then we start checking to see whether they've got it right. And this bit here converts our random number from the default, which is a uint32, to an int, and allows us to check whether or not that's equal to the guess. If it is, we say correct. If not, we say nope, it was, and then whatever the number was there. Fantastic. So I think that should be our final working app. I'm just going to get rid of label. And now let's run this and take a look. I think we should find it all works well. So first of all, let's just do a guess. Excellent. And we've got our number keyboard here. So let's guess 1. Nope, it was a 0. Nope, it was a 4. So it does look to me like it's working. There we go. I finally got it right. Brilliant. So that's working exactly how we would want it to. Great. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you managed to do at least a good portion of it yourself. Now, I'm afraid we do have to go back and learn a bit more Swift, but we'll do it in as entertaining a way as possible, and we'll go back and look at loops next. I'll see you in the next video.